Now, heading into the 2024 season, it's not a stretch at all to say that Georgia probably has the best roster returning in the conference and maybe the country. The bookmakers have them at the highest odds to win the SEC, but who is their biggest competition within the conference? Now, most will say Texas, and I get that. Some will say Alabama, and even without Nick Saban at the helm, that isn't crazy. But to me, it's a team that's never even played in the SEC championship game, and that's the Ole Miss Rebels. Some of you will scoff at that. It's all right. But when you look at all the variables, it really does line up. Now, we know the most important two are the quarterback and the line of scrimmage. Well, Ole Miss has those in spades. You have Jackson Dart, who returns with more experience than Joe Pesci in mob movies, and an offensive line that returns 3 key starters with a combined over 111 starts, and that's not counting the key additions they've made to the offensive line through the portal. Now, they're loaded at the skill position on the outside and at running back, but I'm not really going to worry about Lane Kiffin and the offense. It's kind of like worrying about the fries at McDonald's. I know they're going to be good. It's the other stuff I'm worried about. Now, the defense has been what has elevated Ole Miss to their new heights. They've achieved balance, which we say all the time. It keeps you on the beam in this game. Now, last year, they were incredibly disruptive at getting in the backfield, and they actually led the SEC in turnover margin. They've become a more complete team with LSU. They've pretty much traded places. Now LSU is the explosive offense and the very bad defense. Nobody saw that coming. Now that same defense that had those numbers last year returns over half of their starters and could be even better. Now another variable is the schedule. We know how crucial that is. And Ole Miss gets Georgia at home with a schedule around that is lighter than most of the SEC. But the one variable out there that I think could really be a deciding factor is Ole Miss hasn't tasted the filet mignon yet. As a team, as a fan base, they're still hunting it. They're hungry. In fact, they're a starving rabid dog for it right now. And they know the window is not next year or 3 years down the road, but it's right now. Georgia's eaten so much filet, they're having to find ways to make it better. Bama's in the same boat. The Rebels just want the slab of meat. They don't need the add-ons. You can keep your steak butter. They're good on the crab and the onion straws. And a starving team with potential is more dangerous than anything. And they have the personnel to actually do it. Now, Lane will call this rat poison. And he's right. They don't need to sweat Georgia right now. In fact, the most important thing to them should be the next rep, the next class, the next meeting. You don't reach the top by zeroing in on one team. You reach it by making your opponent faceless, a la The Process. And that will determine if the Rebels can finally get to taste that good steak. David Cone, former Michigan quarterback, to my left. And y'all know it's Friday. Y'all know who's on the right here. Shoot it. Bing, 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 bing.
This is flaming chocolate.
You bow to your sensei. Bow to your sensei.
I am Dragon.
I am Dragon. Y'all thrown a perfect hitter the last couple of weeks.
A perfect hitter?
Yeah, y'all did, right?
A perfect game?
Perfect game.
No.
You know what I meant. So I'm going to go 1.5 today.
1.5?
Not a lot of room for error. The boys got to stay on their tippies.
Look, I'm locked in. I'm locked in. Your name will not get said. I can refer to him as Flaming Dragon, that guy over there, Professor Wiener Schnitzel, whatever.
Trying to learn something or what?
Yeah, but David, this Ole Miss team,
Woo-wee!
all the stars are aligning. And we don't make our predictions, I feel like I say this every show, our projections until the end of fall camp. But the spidey senses are telling me Ole Miss may beat Georgia at home during the regular season and then possibly lose to them in the SEC championship game. But anybody that laughs at Ole Miss and think this is just, oh, your granddaddy's Ole Miss, they're going to score a lot of points and they can't stop anybody, it's a new era over there. And I think this team and that variable of not having done it yet, still climbing that mountain, which we saw Georgia, right, couldn't get over the Nick Saban hump. Right? Nick Saban had to go to Alabama to get them to finally get back to where they needed to be. They hadn't tasted it in a while. And then Auburn hadn't tasted it in a while and watched Alabama taste it, so then they wanted to taste it. This Ole Miss team, something feels right this year to me.
Yeah, Ole Miss is about to be really, really good. So is Missouri, for that fact, while we're talking about teams that are usually underrated. But apart from the players they have coming back and, the motivation because they've never been in the SEC championship game, to me, it's Lane Kiffin's focus. He was able to stay focused down the stretch of the 2023 season in a way that he wasn't in 2022 when the Auburn job offer was coming open, or really since I've seen him in his career. And that carried over into the bowl game. That's carried over now into the momentum of the transfer portal, retaining all his players. I know Quinshon Judkins left, but I think that they've still been net positive in the transfer portal. I think they're going to have a great season. For me, I'm still going to go with Alabama, though, to be the biggest threat to Georgia. It's the least popular opinion. Everyone's praying for the downfall of Alabama. Please, finally, now that Nick Saban has retired, please don't be good anymore. I'm just looking at it as logically as I can, guys. I mean, Jalen Milroe's still playing quarterback. He finished 6th in the Heisman Trophy voting. This entire coaching staff coming over from Washington just led the Huskies to the national championship, and 20% of that roster, guys, are still 5-star players. We're only a couple seasons removed from when we said Nick Saban may have signed the greatest recruiting class of all time. Some of those guys left in the transfer portal. A lot didn't, right? There's a lot of holes to plug, but I think that, they've got the guys to do it. When you talk about getting teams at home, yes, Alabama's going to have to go to Knoxville. They have to go to Baton Rouge, and then Norman, Oklahoma. That's going to be a fun one.
Yeah.
But they get Auburn in the Iron Bowl at home, and they get Georgia at home. And this Georgia-Alabama game in Tuscaloosa this season, I mean, sign me up right this second.
What you feel like it's going to be, and I believe it comes right after the Wisconsin game. So it's the first Alabama home game.
No, they get a bye.
They get a bye in
buys
between.
This year.
All right. So they go to Camp Randall in Wisconsin, get a bye, and then play Georgia at home. So that's going to be the first big home test for Kalen DeBoer and that new staff. If Alabama hadn't beaten Georgia in the SEC championship game last year, and Georgia would have won that, I would lean more that way. And look, it could happen. Trying to predict what's going to happen between Alabama and Georgia with all those NFL players, especially the Eagles, it's tough. But Flaming Dragon, over there, I think you got a little bit of a different perspective there.
I mean, both of you are correct. I think Alabama's still going to be Alabama this year. You look at the talent; they did lose a lot of pieces. But the team I'm looking at, and you mentioned it earlier, I'm talking about the Texas Longhorns. Yeah. And this is what I'm excited about. One, you bring back Mr. Him, and that is your quarterback, Quinn Ewers, who's going to be a Heisman finalist, in my opinion, has a really good chance to win it. You bring back 4 starters on the offensive line. Welcome to the SEC. That is giant. Did you lose some pieces? Of course. You lost Xavier Worthy. You lost Adonai Mitchell, Javonte Sanders, a tight end, a D lineman. But the question is right now, the Steve Sarkisian, if there's anything he can do, 1, the skill position players are going to be elite in that offense. They always are. 2, you bring back your guy at quarterback. 3, I think they're going to figure it out on the D-line. They weren't terrible last year, but they weren't great. Obviously, the holes are where that's in the secondary. We saw an Alabama team last year go to Bryant-Denny and beat a Texas team. Go to Bryant-Denny and beat Alabama. And in my opinion, the score was closer than it actually was.
I agree with that.
So I think Sark and Texas have the depth, the explosion, and the talent. Is the schedule the greatest? No.
They get Georgia at home.
You get Georgia at home. Obviously, you have Oklahoma and a couple other teams, and there's not going to be a walk in the park like DeMarcus Cousins says, but I think Texas has the talent and the depth right now to compete week in and week out in the SEC.
Look, and it's up front, right? And again, I'll say this every show, and it may be boring, it may not be the sexiest thing, but if you're going to compete, you got to be good up front. And I'm not talking about just one game. I'm talking about throughout the whole grind of a season, whether you're in the SEC, whether you're in the ACC, whether it's the NFL or Friday Night Tykes. Regardless of what system you run, if you're not good up front, in aggregate, over the long term, it's not going to work. I just worry about Quinn Ewers' health. He hadn't been able to stay healthy fully for a whole year.
Yep.
I think that's a legitimate concern when you're trying to run the table or get close to doing it. Now, Arch Manning had a great spring game, but I don't care if it's Arch Manning, I don't care if it's Archie Manning, I don't care if it's Peyton Manning. If you're a young freshman or a young player and you haven't got a ton of experience, counting on you to go be perfect out there or be anything close to that in these type of games is going to be tough. But going back to Ole Miss, the elevation of this program has taken place not because of Lane Kiffin's play calling on offense. We know they're going to be good on offense. When I go to Chick-fil-A, I know the chicken's going to be good. But how good is everything else? The defense is legitimate. And what they're returning, I mean, just got a big DB from Houston as well, transferred in the secondary. But the defensive line has taken them from a team that can beat you in multiple ways. They don't just outscore you. And that, to me, is what makes Ole Miss a legitimate threat. And if you're an Ole Miss fan, That's why I think you should be as excited as you've ever been going into a year. Now, with big expectations, right, comes, big failures if it doesn't work out. But you want to be in that spot. I would much rather be in the spot where I'm like, hey, man, we're going to be pretty damn good, right? So it's going to be fascinating, especially adding Texas and Oklahoma to the mix. We want to know, who are you on? Are you with Texas? Are you with Ole Miss? Are you with Alabama? Missouri, I think that's a great point to bring up. I think there's a lot of similarities in between Missouri and Ole Miss. But remember, Missouri has been in the SEC championship game. Ole Miss, I think, what was coaching.
Forgettable.
It was forgettable because
I don't mean that disrespectfully. I mean, for Ole Miss fans,
got murdered.
You take pride in that. I'm just saying, what was that? 10 years ago?
10 years, yeah, and you got destroyed. Yeah. So it's not like
and the grand sum, this is a proud franchise, a proud program. The grand sum of their ambitions isn't to play in an SEC championship.
Exactly right.
And this team returning this year with the momentum of last year, the parallels to the Ole Miss team, they're everywhere, including the schedule. Guys, Missouri, they could reel off. They could be 6-0 by the time they host Auburn. They do have Texas A&M in College Station, but we'll see.
Look, Missouri and Ole Miss are two teams. I think we said it, a couple months ago. Don't be shocked if those two teams are in the race to actually play each other in the SEC championship down the stretch of this SEC season. So it should be wild. What's up, YouTube? Hey, thanks for stopping by. Really appreciate you guys' support. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Keep sharing the show. We're loving all the interactions. Again, without you, there is no us, and we really, really appreciate it.